She was very beautiful, wasn't she? This woman of Egypt, who left her scar upon your heart. Her skin was white as curd, her eyes green as the cedars of Lebanon, her lips tamarisk honey.
Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to take a look at the life of the iconic Margaret Yvonne Middleton, known as Yvonne De Carlo. And if you're new here, don't forget to click the subscribe button. Yvonne De Carlo was a Canadian-born American film and television actress, dancer, and singer. She began her film career by starring in small film roles for Columbia Studios, Paramount Pictures, Universal International. Margaret Yvonne Middleton was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, on September 1st, 1922. She was the daughter of an aspiring actress, Marie De Carlo, and a salesman, William Middleton. De Carlo was born as Margaret Yvonne Middleton in Vancouver, British Columbia, and was nicknamed Peggy. I was named Margaret Yvonne Margaret because my mother was very fond of one of the derivatives of the name. She was fascinated at the time by the movie star Baby Peggy, and I suppose she wanted a Baby Peggy of her own, said Yvonne. Her maternal grandfather, Michael De Carlo, was Sicilian-born, and her maternal grandmother, Margaret Purvis, was Scottish-born. Margaret's mother ran away from home when she was 16 to become a ballerina. After a couple of years working as a shop girl, she was finally married in 1924. When Yvonne was just 3 years old, her father, William, abandoned the family after being involved in a series of shady deals with the wrong people. Rumors claimed that he had perished at sea while trying to get away. Whatever the truth, and we'll get to that later, it was no foundation to build a healthy childhood for the girl. And then her mother had to go and make it worse. She lived with her grandparents. By the time she entered grade school, she found that her strong singing voice brought her the attention she longed for. Peggy's mother, Marie, recognized her singing talent, but had already decided that Peggy would be a dancer. Marie had a strong desire to see her daughter become a star and took extreme measures to achieve this. As a teenager, Peggy was taken to Hollywood by her mother, where she was enrolled in a dancing school while also attending LeConte Middle School. Margaret also lived in a downtown apartment with her mother, where Marie took on odd jobs such as a waitress. Mother and daughter were uprooted when their visas expired. She would have to make 3 trips, the first from Los Angeles to Vancouver within a few years, where they returned, unable to find work. She dropped out of Vancouver's now defunct King Edward High School to focus more on her dance studies. As it turned out, Marie was right about her daughter. She was destined to be gorgeous and had real star power. In 1940, the teenage yet very developed girl won second place at the Miss Venice Beauty Contest. More than that, a talent scout who had been in the crowd urged her to audition for a chorus line part at the Earl Carroll Theater. The theater, located on the famous Sunset Boulevard, was everything Yvonne and her mother had been looking for. But when they got to the audition, they experienced their worst nightmare. The booking agent escorted De Carlo and her mother to the long-awaited audition, but it was during the audition that De Carlo realized something distressing. Carroll's intentions were not genuine. He only wanted her there to examine her upper assets. This bold request angered Yvonne and her mother, prompting them to leave immediately. Unfortunately, her next experience was humiliating in an entirely different manner. Trying to stick it to Carroll and his wandering hands, De Carlo and her mother headed right over to the rival nightclub Florentine Gardens. But this was no Hail Mary. For this audition, De Carlo tap danced in front of a raucous crowd. Then, grossly enough, the owner of the club left her fate up to the audience, asking, "Well, folks, is she in or out?" After receiving applause and whistles, De Carlo landed the role. However, her troubles were just beginning and they were about to become dangerous. Despite this, De Carlo worked her way up from being a chorus girl to a featured dancer at the Florentine Gardens. Throughout this time, she was under pressure because, as a Canadian citizen, she was working in the U.S. without a green card. Eventually, her situation caught up with her when immigration authorities detained and deported her after a few months of performing on stage. It was her first brush with the law. It also produced a surprising result. As it turned out, her manager at Florentine Gardens, Niels Granlund, was certain he had a rising star on his hands and was desperate to keep De Carlo around. He wrote to the Canadian government offering to sponsor and steadily employ his protege. The plea worked, and De Carlo came back to Los Angeles by the skin of her teeth, but as her star kept rising, she began to get the wrong kind of attention. By the early 1940s, Yvonne De Carlo had moved up the ranks and earned a handful of film roles, plus a contract with Paramount. In 1942, she even got cast as a handmaiden to the starlet Dorothy Lamour in the popular Road to franchise installment Road to Morocco. But this was a double-edged sword. Soon people were dubbing De Carlo as a threat girl to Lamour, and she made her first rival. As it happened, though, De Carlo's personal life was heating up around this time, too. Just after De Carlo signed with Paramount, she met director Billy Wilder, who was just about to make his masterpiece, Double Indemnity. The beautiful young starlet and the experienced helmsman quickly fell into a dalliance, and De Carlo described Wilder as the first love of my life. Nonetheless, she also called him the physical antithesis of my lifelong dream man. According to Factinate.com, when De Carlo struck up her fling with Wilder, there was a dark side to their love. Wilder was actually married at the time, although he and his wife had separated. As a result, he and De Carlo occupied a small rented love shack to carry out their relationship. It couldn't have been the easiest way to love someone, and De Carlo was about to learn that the hard way. All signs pointed to the fact that Wilder was on a rebound from his marriage, but the naive De Carlo likely couldn't have predicted he would betray her as hard as he did. After a short-lived but passionate union, Wilder ended up leaving her for another up-and-coming actress, Doris Dowling. Down and out, De Carlo took the only revenge she knew how. If the best revenge is success, Yvonne De Carlo certainly achieved it. Just as she was dealing with the fallout of her relationship, the role of a lifetime came along. Producers were looking for an exotic-looking actress for the part of Salome in the upcoming film Salome, Where She Danced, and De Carlo beat out 20,000 other women for the part. Then again, there is a more scandalous side to this story. According to lore, De Carlo nabbed the role of Salome because some young Royal Canadian Air Force pilots back home campaigned heavily for her, citing the starlet as one of their favorite pin-up girls. The real story? De Carlo had 2 pilot friends and urged them to get their buddies on board for a little PR campaign. Yes, our girl was cunning, and it paid off. Salome, Where She Danced, turned De Carlo into a glamour girl and bona fide, for real this time, pin-up girl overnight. Although the film wasn't exactly a critical success, audiences turned out in droves to see her sensual dancing on screen. As one writer put it, she had all the looks one girl could ask for. More than that, Salome earned her a new contract with a new studio, Universal. Yet when it came to De Carlo's life, every time she was on the up and up, that usually meant it was about to come crashing down at any moment. Oh boy, did it. Just after Salome came out, De Carlo met the man who could ruin her. At a release party for another film in her hometown of Vancouver, she ran into none other than notorious old Hollywood Lothario, eccentric and billionaire Howard Hughes. Hughes was a long way away from his stomping grounds in Los Angeles, and he had a very creepy reason to be there. Hughes was infamous for dating a string of beautiful starlets, and his seduction tactics could be a little unorthodox. With De Carlo, it was no different. After announcing his intention to woo De Carlo, Hughes also admitted he had seen Salome when she danced 5 times and had flown into Vancouver from Los Angeles just to get her alone. After this outburst, you'd think De Carlo would turn him away. Well, nope. Her response was just as bizarre. Just as with Billy Wilder, De Carlo was hardly in love at first sight with Hughes. She said she felt just kind of sorry for Hughes, who looked lanky, underfed, and remarkably sad. Even so, she made a surprising surprising decision. She decided to jump into a relationship with Hughes anyway, unheeding any lessons she had learned with Wilder. As anyone could have told her, this decision would come back to bite her. Within a day of their meeting, De Carlo and Hughes had ignited a torrid romance, but while De Carlo quickly got over her pity for Hughes and fell head over heels, her paramour certainly didn't return the favor. Aloof and ungiving, Hughes would do things like take her up in one of his many planes and teach her how to take off and land, but not to actually fly. Still, a girl can perhaps tolerate a certain amount of red flags when dating Howard Hughes. The next warnings, however, were undeniable. As De Carlo fell more and more in love with Howard Hughes, she got yet another taste of betrayal. Hughes steadfastly ignored his girlfriend's many attempts to get him to propose, and he refused to reveal their relationship to the public. To almost no one's surprise, the couple broke up soon after they started. And that's about when De Carlo went off the deep end. Billy Wilder and Howard Hughes had been De Carlo's first forays into the frenzied love life of a famous movie star, and following her breakup with Hughes, she really let loose. She hooked up with stars like Robert Stack and Burt Lancaster, and dated so publicly that the press gave her the somewhat unflattering nickname Hollywood's #1 Bachelor Girl. With a face like that, though, can you blame her? Besides, when she did try to settle down again, it was an utter disaster. In 1947, Yvonne De Carlo earned another respectably sized part in the film noir Brute Force, starring none other than her lover, Burt Lancaster. But this time, De Carlo seemed to only have eyes for her fellow contract player Howard Duff. Although De Carlo was fresh off her wild streak, it didn't seem to matter to either of them, and they quickly got engaged. Yeah, bad idea. At first, everything looked like it was coming up roses for De Carlo and Duff. Even the studio heads, who were infamously picky about who their stars could date, approved of the union. But there was one enormous problem. As De Carlo admitted, the pair had almost nothing in common. In fact, Duff's biggest selling point was the fact he wanted to marry her at all, something she had never gotten from Hughes. After all that heartbreak, De Carlo was willing to settle for a sure thing. Little did she know her fiancé had a skeleton in his closet. In April 1947, Duff and De Carlo announced their engagement, getting a lot of attention from Hollywood gossip papers. However, De Carlo noticed that Duff was a heavy drinker, which led her to make a tough decision. Ending any engagement is difficult, but ending a high-profile Hollywood engagement is even more challenging. Despite this, De Carlo decided to end the engagement with Duff when she realized the extent of his addiction. She was at another low point in her personal life, which meant more bad rebound decisions. Only her next one was something quite different. Yvonne De Carlo might have been unlucky in love, but at least she didn't do anything by halves. Her next lover shocked the world. While Prince Abdulreza Pahlavi of Iran was visiting Hollywood, he met and became infatuated with De Carlo. Soon enough, he was sweeping her off her feet, even taking her to his royal palace in Tehran. This royal fairy tale eventually petered out, but it did give De Carlo a new sense of ambition in her career, and she got some very big ideas. At this time, De Carlo was making most of her money appearing in costume dramas and musicals, which often used Technicolor instead of the more serious, seeming black and white. In fact, De Carlo was so synonymous with the colorful style that for 3 years in a row, Hollywood cameramen voted her the Queen of Technicolor. Except there was a big issue with this. As it turned out, those lighthearted Technicolor films just weren't doing it for De Carlo. She wanted more out of her career and started aiming for more roles in black and white films, particularly in film noir. So when she got a juicy part in the noir Crisscross opposite Burt Lancaster again, she thought it was a dream come true. It was actually a horror story. Getting a role in Crisscross had been a triumph, but before De Carlo even got to enjoy her accomplishment, she had her heart broken. Critics called her attempt at the femme fatale character uneven. Then things got worse. The next year, her director on Buccaneers Girl glibly noted that De Carlo was not a first-class star, but came in on schedule. In short, he was calling her merely competent. great for a bank teller, not what you want to hear as an artist. And then things got really awkward. After all her efforts, De Carlo never made it as one of the great femme fatale actresses of her time. Defeated, she returned to the films she no longer enjoyed, but which were her bread and butter. It led to an excruciating moment. While playing Jane in Calamity Jane and Sam Bass, she was forced to be reunited with her ex-fiancé, Howard Duff. Soon enough, though, another surprise was coming her way. The late 1940s were a whirlwind time for De Carlo, and the next development didn't help matters. While filming the western The Gal Who Took the West, De Carlo did as she usually did and fell in love with one of her crewmates, this time with the burly stuntman Jock Mahoney. Once again hoping to settle down, De Carlo accepted Mahoney's proposal, and once again it ended in blood and tears. During her engagement to Mahoney, De Carlo found herself pregnant, and her dream of settling down and starting a family seemed within reach. Sadly, her joy soon turned into a living nightmare. While undergoing her checkups, doctors discovered an ovarian cyst that required surgery, resulting in the loss of her baby. Instead of standing by his partner during this difficult time, Mahoney ended up hurting her even more deeply. It's possible that the pain of losing a child was too much for Mahoney, or perhaps he wasn't as committed to the relationship as De Carlo had hoped. Either way, their relationship went up in flames soon after her surgery because, in a deja vu from her Billy Wilder years, De Carlo found out Mahoney was seeing actress Margaret Field on the side. With her life starting back from zero, the 1950s became a very dark period in De Carlo's life, where before this point, De Carlo would often date around. She now seemed to desperately cling to any proposal that came her way. Before the middle of the 1950s, she had already been engaged twice more, once to English photographer Cornell Lucas and once to the actor Robert Urquhart, another one of her co-stars turned exes. De Carlo claimed she was just waiting for the right man to come along, but when he did, he came in the strangest of ways. In 1955, while filming Shotgun, De Carlo happened to meet yet another stuntman. She had something of a type, named Bob Morgan. Morgan was married with a daughter at home at the time. De Carlo claimed that despite their mutual attraction, she didn't want to break up his marriage. However, in a matter of months, two extraordinary circumstances brought them together. Just after De Carlo finished filming, she got the offer of the decade. Renowned director Cecil B. DeMille offered her the role of Moses' wife Sephora in his epic film, The Ten Commandments. De Carlo immediately accepted the offer, but when she arrived on set, she saw a very familiar face, Bob Morgan. Something significant had changed since their previous encounter during the filming of Shotgun. Just a few months earlier, Morgan's wife had passed away, leaving him free to pursue a relationship with De Carlo. They were openly attracted to each other and decided to get married on November 21st, 1955, in the midst of filming. Yes, number one bachelorette Yvonne De Carlo had finally made it to the altar, but that's when her problems really started. During her career, De Carlo had picked up a reputation of being a steadfast actress, but not a stunning screen presence. Meanwhile, the Ten Commandments demanded a lot of its actors and their abilities. Terrified that she wouldn't measure up, De Carlo immediately started taking lessons in basket weaving and shepherding to make herself more authentic. She even hired a drama coach to prepare her for the role. But there was something Cecil B. DeMille wanted that no lesson or coach could provide. De Carlo was known as a Technicolor queen, partly because of her gorgeous blue eyes, but DeMille didn't have much use for them on his set. For the authenticity of the film, he thought they should be brown. De Carlo complained, but it was DeMille, so in went the contacts. In the end, though, his choice paid off. Upon the release of the successful film, everyone was buzzing that De Carlo would get a Best Supporting Actress nomination at the Oscars. Unfortunately, this is exactly when Yvonne De Carlo became her own worst enemy. Coming off the Ten Commandments, De Carlo was a happy bride with a whole lot of industry buzz behind her. Then she ruined it all for herself. When the Oscar nominations rolled around, she insisted on going up for the Best Actress category instead of Supporting Actress. Her ego did her dirty, and De Carlo ended up with no nominations at all. Unfortunately, even worse news was on the way. During the filming of a train robbery scene for How the West Was Won in 1963, Bob Morgan, who was De Carlo's stuntman husband, was performing a dangerous stunt as the marshal of the movie. He had to hold onto a log between two train cars, one of which was carrying a heavy load of timber. Unfortunately, something went horribly wrong during the stunt. The chain holding the prop log snapped, and several tons of timber fell onto De Carlo's husband. When the dust cleared, De Carlo was devastated. Although Morgan miraculously survived the accident, he did not escape unscathed. It took him 5 full years to be able to walk properly again without the help of others. Outraged and faced with enormous medical bills, not to mention the 2 children they now had to take care of together, he and De Carlo decided to sue the studio for unsafe conditions. MGM disclaimed any responsibility for the accident. By the mid-1960s, the couple were running low on cash and constantly fighting. De Carlo turned to John Wayne for help, and he offered her a small role in his Western comedy McLintock. Although the role helped with her financial troubles, it wasn't enough.
Very well, Mr. McClintock, if you insist.
De Carlo was still desperate for money, and her desperation led her to a performance that would redefine her career, for better or worse. In just a few years, De Carlo went from rejecting a supporting actress nomination to begging for any role she could get. Despite her reservations when offered the role of Lily Munster in the TV sitcom The Munsters, she had no choice but to accept it. De Carlo needed money, and an American TV show would provide a large paycheck. Despite feeling apprehensive about how her co-stars would perceive her, she accepted the opportunity. However, fate had a surprise in store for Yvonne De Carlo once again. Contrary to expectations, everything went smoothly with the Munsters. The cast discovered that De Carlo had excellent comedic timing and displayed none of the expected Hollywood glamour girl attitude. De Carlo loved the cast, the writing, and the fun. She drew inspiration for her character from a surprising place. She always prepared excessively for her roles, and people wondered how she, a former glamour queen, nailed the camp role of Lily Munster on every episode. De Carlo's response was iconic. She claimed that the creators advised her on the first day of filming to play her just like Donna Reed, an America's sweetheart type who starred in her own wholesome family sitcom show. It worked really well, and soon enough, De Carlo's role on The Munsters started to influence her personal life. While filming The Munsters, De Carlo drove a Jaguar sedan, and to get into the spirit of things, she customized her car with spooky ornaments as a tribute to the work she was doing on the show. However, there was a problem. Fans kept stealing the ornaments as souvenirs from the actress. Oh, the price of fame. Yet there was more in store for De Carlo in case you thought playing a vampire on The Munsters had buried De Carlo's career. Think again. Stephen Sondheim was working on a musical called Follies about washed-up stars facing old age and immediately thought of De Carlo. Ouch! Well, it was actually more flattering than that. De Carlo wound up becoming a muse for one of Sondheim's hit songs. De Carlo played the role on Broadway and belted out, "I'm Still Here." Thankfully, the show was a huge success, but other parts of De Carlo's life were falling apart. De Carlo's personal life took a downturn during this time. After years of arguing about money and being unable to move past the trauma of the MGM accident, De Carlo and her husband Bob Morgan filed for divorce in 1973. De Carlo cited irreconcilable differences when she returned home from a tour of New Zealand. Following the end of her only marriage, De Carlo became very open about her past. In 1987, she wrote an autobiography in which she mentioned 22 lovers, many of whom were handsome A-list stars. But that's not all. She also wrote that she thought the conventional Hollywood types were actually brainless. After dating around, she came to realize she preferred character over looks. In fact, she decided that, listen up, nerds, someone like scientist Albert Einstein would be a good match for her. At the end of her life, De Carlo's life sadly took a nosedive fast. In 1997, her son died suddenly, leaving her absolutely devastated. Soon after, she had a minor stroke that led to her checking into a hospital. De Carlo spent the final 9 years of her life in this institution until heart failure took her life in 2007 at the age of 84. During a 1975 interview, the actress made a scandalous revelation. She'd always said her father was William Middleton, a small-time crook originally from New Zealand. Well, it turns out he wasn't her father after all. She announced all this without giving specifics. All that she said was that her real father was Polynesian. We all can agree that De Carlo's mother certainly believed in her daughter and knew she had potential. De Carlo was truly talented and breathtaking. She ended up becoming successful throughout the years, leaving an amazing legacy behind. The Munsters is still one of the popular TV shows that has ever been aired and still has a lot of influence in Halloween and costumes.
You don't just disappear because they see the Munsters every day, but they don't understand what happened to my hair. When they take a look at me, they say, "What happened to your hair?" You know, Joe, it's wonderful to see you again after so many years. How many years has it been since I saw you? Don't say it. Don't say it.
At least 2 weeks. At least 2 weeks.